When the president says, let everyone see it, I want to understand what it means. Well, because it isn't necessarily great. Mueller hit send and we all get this thing.
That's a great point because it's a very legalistic usage of the word it. And here's why. And you're so right. In other words, you've heard all the pundits explain. I'll repeat it one more time. After the Starr report was released, 800 pages, they changed the regulations in the Code of Federal Regulations, the DOJ ones in Title 28. And they said the report coming from the special counsels to be confidential. So now you fast forward the movie, everybody doesn't like that. I get that. That's a political point. So let's assume it goes confidentially to Bill Barr, exactly the way you've been explaining it this morning. Then Bill Barr decides what, if any, of that information goes to Congress or the public, or he writes his own report. So the question, back to what you're saying, is does it refer to the actual report itself from the special counsel, or can it also cover what Bill Barr may put together? So you're right.
Let's talk about Bill Barr's influence, and I'd love a little historical perspective. We know that the Washington Post has a poll out that says 80% of the public wants to see this report released. We know that the House voted unanimously, 420-0, to release it. Do you think any of this impacts Bill Barr, or do you think Bill Barr is there for the president?
I think General Barr, who's been Attorney General before under Bush 41, I think he would have an institutional, see himself as an institutionalist.
He's not sort of one of these was on the campaign Trump homeboys. He's a different profile.
He didn't get his job through Page Six, unlike most of these folks. So, yeah, I think so. And I know General, he wrote a piece about Trump that is controversial. But my sense is that I don't think there is a historical precedent of a report of this scope and scale not becoming public. And so my sense is that the Attorney General will do the right thing. Yep.
Barrett, we cannot forget there are dozens of sealed indictments that have been filed in D.C. federal court over these last 2 years. I haven't even gotten into the Southern District of New York. How does all that play in here?
Yeah, I mean, indictments don't just go away just because the special counsel files his report. So those are going to continue. Those will likely get passed off to other United States attorneys' offices, and those cases will be litigated. So I don't think we should ever assume that the end is the end. I mean, the end is not until all of the facts come out. The end is not until all of these various cases actually get to play out in federal courts, which is where they should. So even if the special counsel files his report, certainly not the end of the legal story and not the end of legal jeopardy for people that were involved in this.
Eli, AP reporting that the president is now feeling confident. There's a sense of optimism in the White House. Are we supposed to buy that? Let's think about the last 6 days, at least on social media, that the president has had.
That's right. I would be pretty skeptical that he's wholly confident. He might feel confident at certain times, almost trying to convince himself. But at other times, he's obviously, I mean, this is clearly in his head. As Peter noted, he walked up to the reporters yesterday, and before he even took a question, was saying, no collusion, no collusion. This is front and center in his brain, and the White House is preparing for it as well. There are additional attorneys working in the White House counsel's office. There's an attorney who's actually moved into the press space, Stephen Groves, who's ready to sort of field questions and sort of be the press lead as a lot of this stuff comes out. So the White House is mobilizing for this report, but people there will also tell you privately, we don't know what's in it, and we certainly don't know how the president will react. He's obviously tried for a long, long time to tell the public the ending, or what he wants them to believe is the ending, regardless of what the report says, which is no collusion. Whether or not that's borne out by the report, we'll see. I think it's, whatever it says, it's expected that the president will continue to rail against the report itself on Twitter and to complain about it. And I think, at the White House, there's just this uneasiness about about all the things that they don't know and how the president will react to it. Although I do think among the people who are thinking long term about the president surviving this, they may be a little more confident that this could be damaging for a while, but that if there's nothing in there that is really different than all the facts that we already have, that they believe that he'll be able to survive this long term.
All right, well, confidence is king, and certainly the president has it in spades. David, I want to go through the president's sort of political calculation, because the AP writes, while Trump's base has long been suspicious of Mueller, the president's team believes independents and moderate Democrats who backed him in the last election but have since soured may return to the fold if convinced he's been unfairly targeted. I mean, I was unaware that there were scores of moderate Democrats that backed him in the last election, but I'll take the AP be at their word? There were two.
There were two.
Yeah, two of them.
Trump was one of them, actually.
There you go. Well, you know what?
That's a good one.
Jared and Ivanka. There you go. You got it right there.
You're right.
Three.
Yes. What do you think?
Well, look, I don't think we should underscore how important it would be for the president politically in 2020 to get a clean bill of health from a criminal standpoint from the Mueller report. And
Not just Ronnie Jackson.
Correct. And so if the report says that essentially the president didn't do any of the things that he's been accused of by some Democrats in terms of colluding with the Russians and a whole bunch of other things, I think that's very important for him. Because if it's the opposite, I mean, just imagine how that's going to look. It's going to be bad. I do think, though, that the president's issue has never really been the Mueller report and the investigation. I think the issue for the president and whether or not he can win re-election is how he behaves and how he comports himself. I talked to a number of Republican voters who really like everything he does, and they believe that if he acted, let's say, like a more conventional president, he wouldn't be able to accomplish the things he's accomplishing. By the same token, I talked to a whole other segment of Trump voters who tell me, I like the guy, but I wish he would stop behaving the way he's behaving. And when you look at the 2018 midterm elections, why did Republicans lose so many seats in traditionally conservative territory? Because there is a whole subset of more traditional Republican voters, the kind that liked the Bushes, and this is an important part of the coalition, and they just cannot stomach him. And so when things
But they can stomach moderate Democrats. They can't stomach the far left.
They cannot, and that's one of the reasons why, if the president is feeling confident, I think it would be because he's looking at the Democratic field the way it's evolving so far, and it's only been a couple of months, and he's saying to themselves, they're all rushing to get as far in with the progressive base as they possibly can. Now, this is a normal thing that happens in presidential elections. Often there's a pivot back to the center. But if you want to know why Republicans legitimately feel the best they have felt about the president in 2 years, it's because they think that however problematic the president's Twitter habit is, it will all be absolved by Democrats that are too leftist, and they will get all of those skeptical Republicans back into the fold the same way they were able to keep them because Hillary Clinton was a no-go zone for them.
Yes, they're feeling super confident because every night when you turn on Fox News, they talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Democratic Socialist Movement, and they never seem to mention Mikey Sherrill or all the other moderate Democrats who won in the midterms. John, I want to talk about what the president has said in the last 24 hours about late Senator John McCain. Let's share a bit of that.
I endorsed him at his request, and I gave him the kind of funeral that he wanted, which as president I had to approve. I don't care about this. I didn't get thank you. That's okay. We sent him on the way, but I wasn't a fan of John McCain.
It would be difficult for John McCain to send a thank you post-mortem. John Meacham, for days I could not figure out why the president would be going after John McCain. When he does one of these kind of fly-off-the-handle things, you can usually trace it back to his base, and it makes sense. And then Maggie Haberman pointed out, it's not just about John McCain and voting down the health care situation. John McCain ties to the dossier. The dossier gets you to Mueller. Mueller then drums up the Southern District of New York, all which creates a massive hornet's nest, the only hornet's nest that matters to the president. So while the White House is telling us he's beaming with confidence, how could we say he's getting more and more confident when the reason he's truly going after John McCain is because he points to McCain for creating all these true legal issues?
Well, one of the disturbing things for those of us who make a living writing about this stuff is that no one's advanced beyond Shakespeare. So this is Macbeth. You know, he feels guilty. I think this is my sense. I think he feels guilty because he knows that at least corners were cut involving Russia, perhaps far worse. The fact that McCain was trafficking in this or allegedly trafficking in this would be one data point. The fact that McCain's a genuine hero would be another data point. And I think he ends up with this obsession, and he can't talk about what's really on his mind. So McCain becomes this target. I think what he's doing there is he's conflating President Bush's state funeral with McCain's state funeral, but both those things are kind of similar for him because those are people who genuinely dominated the arena in a traditional way.
True patriots, honored for their integrity.
Combat veterans.
Right.
So here's someone who very much wants to be a military hero, but he's really like the Admiral in Mary Poppins, right? I mean, he's on top of the house firing off the cannon. Yeah. And so I think all that's mixed up. But we also don't want to overthink this too much. This is a man who thought that Frederick Douglass was doing great work.
He did.
Right now.
He did.
So we're not dealing with, Einstein. My sense is that he continues to attack McCain because McCain occupies a part of his emotional and brain space that makes him deeply uncomfortable and insecure. And so, therefore, he lashes out. And I don't think it's much more complicated than that.
The president didn't get a ton of applause last night in Ohio when he went after John McCain, though. So it takes me back to who exactly is he doing this for? And doesn't it hurt the argument that this whole Mueller situation is made up by the far left? It's a witch hunt. It's George Soros funded. If actually this takes you back to, wait a minute, maybe the great Senator John McCain had some concerns.
Well, look, I think we have to remember the president's feud with John McCain goes back to the beginning of his campaign in June because he came down the escalator, said what he said about illegal immigrants from Mexico, calling them rapists and murderers and everything else, and John McCain fired off at him, and so the president immediately went on the attack. And the president only knows one speed, and I don't really want to shrink the president, but this is what he does.
And the president's base says right on?
Yes, and much of the president's base says right on. So I think there's two things we need to understand. One is this is just what the president does. Number two, there has been some encouragement for this behavior from certain quarters of the right-wing base, not all, but certain quarters, and so he's egged on. But as we saw during the remarks, there was dead silence because this doesn't go over everywhere, even in front of crowds that are otherwise very supportive of the president. And it's counterproductive in any event because this doesn't gain the president any votes, and not doing this is not going to lose the president any votes.
But maybe it reminds us that John McCain had some concerns, too. And you know what that guy did? He cared about the country.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.